emodels.co.uk. Make something awesome. Hey everyone, it's Foxx from Model Making Guru here. Hello. Welcome to this first episode of our new build for emodels.co.uk. I've been waiting for ages to get on with this and I'm so excited. We are going to be building the MPC 148 scale 22-inch Eagle transporter from Space 1999. Now, if you're an old git like me, you remember fondly Space 1999. Now I know when I did the unboxing video I kind of ragged on it a bit. Since I did that, I went back and watched it, and you know what? Season 1, it's not that bad. Yes, it's cheesy. Yes, it's a bit rubbish, but it's brilliant. It's so lovable. So, if you remember Space 1999, you'll know this vehicle. More than familiar with this vehicle. If you don't, you might still recognise it because it's kind of an iconic sci-fi vehicle. To me, it's the best sci-fi vehicle done because it's the most believable. It's not silly, fantastical nonsense. It's just kind of believable. Plus, it looks kind of cool. But we are going to be building it. So, yes, let's crack on. The plan is we are going to follow the instructions pretty closely. I do need to keep some things in mind because shock, horror, breaking news, cats and dogs living together. I'm going to do some lighting. I know. I was debating whether to do lighting, but one of my followers, Phil Davis, thank you Phil, sent me a little lighting kit, pre-made lighting kit. And it's really simple and really straightforward, and all I need to do is put some lights in the cockpit. So we're going to start with the cockpit, but we're not doing the lighting just yet. But I need to keep some things in mind. My plan is that this nose part of the command module is actually removable. You don't have to glue it. So what we're hoping is this will stay on by itself, so I can install a lighting kit, including the batteries and the switch, in here. And then when you need to turn it on or replace the batteries, you just pop this off, fiddle with the switch, take the batteries out, what have you, and put it back on again. I was looking into doing magnets to attach the whole command module to the main body of the ship, but I might not need to do that. I may be able to glue this part onto the ship permanently, and then just have this. It depends how tight this fit is, basically. So when building's underway, we'll be able to assess that. I'll also need to reinforce the seam line between the top and the bottom half, because constantly taking it on and off, you're going to be squishing it, and I don't want it to crack or damage. But for this part, we're going to focus on the Cockpit and Gefahrten, the command module. We need to paint the figures. Thus, we probably need to paint the back wall. We need to get that painted before we do the finish assembly anyway, but we'll see if we can get that painted in here as well. So let's get started. Without further ado, we have the relevant parts we need. We have the two halves of the command module. Look at the size compared to my hand. I don't know if this is going to fit on my desk, but we'll find out. Two halves of the command module Gefahrten. We have the outer back wall of the command module. We have the back wall. And we need the two dudes, the two pilots. Now, if I remember rightly, the way this model's been designed is it's designed to resemble as close as possible the 44-inch filming miniature, which used two pilots from a Gemini space model, an old, I think it's an old Revell kit. It's like many years old, early 70s, or somebody made it anyway. So they used two figures. So they've designed these pilots to look as close as possible, not to the dudes in Space 1999, because it's kind of alright, but it's not spot on. They're more supposed to look like the actual figures from the model they used in the filming miniature, because these are off-the-shelf figures. So it's quite good. It's quite cool they've done that. It looks a bit like the Space 1999 spacesuit, but not quite. And that's the idea. They don't want to reproduce the Eagle itself. They want to reproduce the model that the filmmakers made, the model makers for Jerry Anderson made. So that's quite good. They've researched all that. So we need to get these parts. So we will get these ready. Now, I'm going to kind of take this through as basic. So you probably know all this anyway, but if you don't, if this is the first build, it's quite a nice first build for you. When removing parts from the sprues, don't use a knife and don't just pull them off. Always use a good pair of nippers. I've got here some Tamiya's side cutters, but any other cutters are available. And the trick is to take it off the sprue. This is the sprue that the piece is on, and this is the gate that attaches to the piece. It's where the plastic is injected. Some kits have big, huge gates. I'm looking at Tony's Meng model there. Some kits have tiny gates. This is sort of intermediate. This is average. So what we're going to do, I'm going to cut it off, but you don't want to cut right against the piece, because if you cut too much, you might make an indentation that you have to then later fill. So the trick is to cut just a little bit away from the piece to start with. That's quite hard plastic, this. So we'll start with, this is the first cut there, that's the first cut. Cut a distance away from the piece, just so you can make sure you're not damaging the piece at all. So you can see now we have these big gates on there. Now what we can do, now we're not kind of wrestling with the gate or the sprue, is we can cut a bit closer. So we can go even closer in, but again, not right against the model if you can avoid it. I'm going to go sideways because that's the easiest way to, or is it? No, let's go that way. Can be quite tricky because sometimes the parts can slope. Oops. But you want to leave yourself a little tiny bit of the sprue left over. I kind of pinged, I didn't expect it to ping. There we go. That one's not too bad. I can just trim that one a little bit. Yeah. There we go. So you can see now we've got little bits of the sprue, the gate left over. And that's pretty much how we want them to start now. So we need to get rid of these now. Now you could just sand these down. You could just file them or sand them. But when these two parts go together, we want to maintain this shape. So what I'll need to do, before I start trimming these off, because if you've got, say, two pieces that go together, and you trim these off with the knife, and then you sand them quite nicely, invariably what you'll find is you've sanded the two halves differently, and you'll get the pieces won't match up. So what I'm going to do is cut the other piece off the sprue and then loosely fit them together, and then we can start trimming the nub. So let me go and do that, and then we'll trim them properly and sand them down. Back in a moment. Okie dokie, that's the two halves taken off the sprue. These aren't glued together, they're just loosely taped together so I can work on the nubs. Now before we do that, I've been doing some thinky. I think this might be quite a thinky build. I was looking at the lighting. Obviously my plan is to put all the lighting in here. However, I did a little test run. This is just blue tacked onto the back wall. And when I was putting the back in and out, what was happening was, you won't see it now, but when I was taking the back on and off, every time I was doing it, the two halves of the outer skin were flexing like that. Now if you were to put super glue in here, of course it would just crack. If you were just to do a glue seal, it would just crack. I need to minimise how much that moves and ideally make it to nothing at all. I did look at other ways of doing the lighting, so putting, say, the battery and everything else in, say, the passenger module and magnetising the floor, things like that. But the wiring I've got isn't long enough, and it was a nice free gift from Phil, so I don't want to suddenly say, hey, can you make me another one? I want to work with what I've got. So, and it's going to work, trust me. The way it works is in the cockpit, you've got two teeth on the top and two teeth on the bottom. Now, I've sanded those away, I've got rid of them. And they go into these little holes here in the outer back wall. But they have to ride over the inner back wall, they have to go and into the hole. So when I was doing that, of course, the two teeth were catching on the bottom and it was pushing the two pieces apart, so you got a snug fit. What I realised was, though, you don't need the two teeth on the bottom. If you have the two teeth on the top, it actually holds it just fine. If I do it the other way around, if I do it that way, it just falls off because there's no teeth on the bottom. But you're not going to have this displayed upside down, so that's fine. The friction fit on the top half is absolutely enough. So what I've done is I've sanded down this bottom part a little bit more just to make it a looser fit still. I've taken those two teeth off the bottom, and what I will do, because there's still a little bit of movement, if you just lock the top two teeth in, and this is easy doing it now, when this is mounted onto the rest of the ship you'll be like, I can't get them in. It does still do a little bit of flexy. So what I intend to do is when we do glue this together, I'll use some plastic card inside to glue it together slightly apart. So when it's all set and glued, it'll have that slight gap. Then I can go in and fill the gap, and then I can line the inside with epoxy glue just to give it even more strength. The reason I'll do it slightly apart is then because this will slide in without pushing anything anywhere, because it's already wide enough. It doesn't need to be a tight fit down the bottom, like I said, because as long as the teeth hold it in place, and it's going to be on a shelf, it's not going to be moved or handled, it's going to be absolutely fine. And then it means you can just pop this off and get to the battery and the lighting inside. So that, just wanted to quickly show you that. So that's how we're going to do this when we glue it. I'm going to try and get some card in there. Like I said, there are other ways to light this that don't involve you taking the front off all the time, but I want to work with the lighting kit I've very kindly been given, and this is kind of asking to be used somehow. So a little bit of thinky and some engineering, and it all came out okay. Right, let's get on with the sanding. So we want to remove all these nubs. Now the reason I've taped this together is that while I'm working on these nubs, I don't want to sand down or gouge out one side more than the other. I need to keep the nice neat shape. And I have enough problems dealing with the seam line, never mind bits that don't quite line up. So it's going to be fairly straightforward. First we're going to trim these down with a sharp blade, and then we're going to do some sandy. Now I'm going to do this towards myself, because it's how I do it. I'm comfortable doing it, and 99% of the time I don't stab myself, but I am kind of known as Captain Stabberty. So hey, if you're doing this, if you can, do it that way. I just can't, for some reason I can't get good results when I do it that way. I gouge everything. But if I do it this way, I kind of go okay. All we're going to do is very carefully drop it. This is where Tony's going to be cringing now. Tony is a trained medic, so he knows what he's doing. I'm not a trained medic, I'm just an idiot. All we're going to do is take this, and we're just going to very lightly start to shave the nub away. Just very, very gently. I'm not going heavy. And I'm trying to keep the blade as flat to a curved surface as I can, as flush to the surface. And the reason I want the other piece on there is because if I need to trim this down more, I need to trim down the other side just as much to keep the flatness. And what you'll see here is that it actually sticks out more on the top. So if I then come back here, and I know Tony is cringing right now, but what I find is if I brace my hands really carefully with my thumb there, I can't then flip. I can only flip that far, so I'm not going to stab myself. But like I say, if you're doing this, or if you're not used to doing this, just do it the other way around. Do it away from yourself. Don't be an idiot just because I am. So I'm just very slowly shaving that down. I'm hoping this has come out on camera. Unfortunately, I'm filming something white, which is never the best thing to film. So then what I might do is draw my blade across like this, and that's got rid of most of it, pretty much. Now we are going to do sanding when we fill this seam, but we're going to sand this now first anyway. So what I want to do is sand any excess now that's left on there away a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is take my sanding thinny stick, my Ultimate Modelling Products thinny stick, available from emodels.co.uk, and very, very lightly I'm just going to go over it. I'm putting on no pressure, and I'm following the curve. Now this isn't a spongy stick, so you have to go quite light, and all I want to do is just sand away anything else that might be left, and I'm following, if you can see there, I'm following the curve as best I can. So that should be most of it gone. Then I'll take a more spongy sanding stick. Again, this is an Ultimate one. It's softer and finer grain, so it's not going to do as much cutting. And what I want to do now is sand over what I've just done, just to take out any sanding marks from that last stick. Now I can go a bit heavier here, but I'm still going quite light. So I'm just going to go around, feel it with my thumbnail. There's still a little bit there I can see. Move it around in the light and you'll see different shadows that might suggest more needs to be done. Take a bit more off, and I've got to be careful of this little flat round bit at the end as well, which I want to keep. So I've got to follow the curve. Cool. So the first stick is really just to sand anything away. The second stick is to clean up what you've just sanded and get rid of any excess sanding marks. So that's got rid of the nub. Now what you can do if you want is go in with a polishing stick. You don't have to do this. If you're going to use a good primer, it might cover up any little fine micro scratches, but I'm going to go in with a buffing stick, which is a, I don't want to show you the name because Yeah, it's not one you can get from your models, but it's a buffing and then a polishing, so it's very smooth and even smoother. So I'm going to go over that first with this. And this is how you would get it back to shiny plastic if you were sanding something you wanted to be shiny. Now you don't, like I say, you don't have to do that bit. That's just if, you know, you've got lots of deep sanding marks. Now there's a little tiny bit there. I'll do it on camera, dear. There's a little tiny bit there, but it's fine because once this has been filled, we'll be sanding over it again anyway. So that'll get filled away and then sanded back. So that's what I need to go and do with all these nubs. Just clean them up so there's no obvious nub there. Okay, swift handbrake turn. You'll have to get used to these. Yes, haven't glued everything together yet because I suddenly realised, hello, I've got to do the lighting, duh. See, I've not done lighting before, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not enjoying it. I'm not enjoying it. It's not my thing doing lighting. I'm not electronically minded or that practically minded at all. So this might be the only kit I do lighting on ever, but I really wanted to because it just begs for it. And as I say, Phil sent me this very nice lighting kit, so I can't not do it. But I'm not enjoying it. Not enjoying it. Anyway, let me show to you the worst piece of work I've ever done. The ugliest piece of construction. My God, that's terrible. Look at that. Phil did send me 2 lighting kits. One had a couple of little tiny LEDs on, and this one had the 2 bigger bulbs. And I was going to use the one with the smaller bulbs. So I built this little thing down at the bottom here out of plastic card, this little strip and some reinforcing pieces behind it with a hole in for it to stick out. Then I kind of destroyed it. I kind of broke it. All the wires broke, and I was like, oh, because they were really fine wires. I was trying to manhandle it in place. They all just fell apart. So, yeah, sorry, Phil. I broke your thing. But this one's still going strong. So, it came, when he provided it with these 2 bulbs on a piece of plastic card about this big. So I've cut the card down to size. I braced it with some plastic card here and here, and also this unholy mess of just all the plastic card in the world. Which has all been jammed in there and glued in place and reinforced with Tamiya thick glue, the normal Tamiya polystyrene cement. This is just kind of held in place for the moment. So that's in there and it's dried now and it's not going anywhere. That's permanently installed. These little bracing pieces on the front and back here just hold it in place. Stop it, stay there. Stop it moving around. And this means it's not going to go anywhere. There is a whole metric ton and a half of PVA, or white glue, or Elmer's glue if you live in the US of A. Here, and this is going to be built up in stages just to kind of cover these bits of wires so that eventually when I take this clamp off, they'll just stay there. These wires here, the red and black ones, are loose. They're going to move around. But I just wanted to glue these down a little bit so that they don't float around and get in the way of the battery. I could have taped them in, but there's not a lot of space to put tape on, and I haven't actually got any decent gaffer tape. But there's not a lot of space either side for tape, so I thought I'll just drown them in PVA. So, hey, you know, I do love my PVA glue. I use some, I'll cover up the brand, I use some extra sticky PVA. It's just tacky glue, it's called. And it's just extra sticky PVA, so it's going to take about 24 hours to properly dry. That's only pain in the bum. So that's the lighting in. This is loosely blue tacked on there. What's going to happen is this is the top half, and the bottom half will obviously be like that. And what will happen is the battery actually neatly sits in this little recess here. Now I don't need to attach it in place or fix it with little clamps or anything or little thing to build it into, because you just have to put it in and put this back on and that's it. You're not going to be moving it around, so it doesn't matter if it's moving around inside, as long as it's out of the way. You're not going to see it because the bottom windows are just going to be painted black. You don't see through those. The only windows you're going to see through are the 2 at the top, the cockpit windows. They're the dudes see through. So that's going to be fine. It does mean if you look at a funny angle, you might see a bit of wire here and there, as if I've not pushed it in all the way. But I can live with that. It's not a problem. You're only ever going to see it from the front, from above, so it's not a problem. And it's my first ever lighting attempt, and yeah, it was very nerve-wracking putting all this together. When I broke the first set of lights, I'm like, oh my God, this build is finished, I'm done, I can't do lighting ever. But I thought, no, I'll see what I can do with these. So I'm not enjoying the electronic-y lighting wiring bit. This is why I don't do lighting, because I know I don't enjoy it. If you're into lighting and stuff, this is a brilliant kit for adding lighting. I can understand that, because this whole cockpit is perfect. You could put batteries in the body, you could mains wire it if you put it onto a display base, you could do all kinds of things. I'm going for a cheap and cheerful, do it all in the cockpit command module. But yeah, if you do like lighting and you know what you're doing, you can probably have a load of fun with this. I don't do lighting and I don't enjoy it, so but we'll do our best. So what is next? While that's going to take about 24 hours to dry, what I need to do is crack on with the bits that I can start painting. It's going to be a few days before I get the epoxy glue to glue the two halves of the command module together anyway. I've got to go up to eModels on Thursday with Skipper Ted. I'm going to go for a little day trip, and I'll be picking up some bits and bobs. But what I can do in the meantime is start on these parts. So we've got the back wall and the two dudes. Now we're going to be painting the dudes, obviously, and we're going to be painting the back wall. Now what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to do this brush painted. I'm not going to do any airbrushing here. I'm going to do some brush painting. Now when we do get to the painting of this model, I'm going to be doing a lot of rattle can painting out in the garden, because this model is so big I can't get it in my spray booth, and I can't do half of it rattle can and half of it airbrush because the colours will never match. So for the exterior I'm probably just going to go completely rattle can, but for these little bits I'll do the rattle can primer, and then we'll do some brush painty. So what I need to do first of all, I've taken these guys off the sprue. I have got rid of the seam down the middle and over the top of the helmet. They're really nice little figures. They're quite soft. The sculpting is quite soft on them. They're not the most detailed figures, but we can still make them look good. So what we need to do first of all is just get their little back parts in. So I'm going to take some Tamiya extra thin, just dot some in there. I'm going to put my little piece in, and then just to give it some extra strength, I'm just going to run the brush around just to get that in, because this is what goes into the back wall of the cockpit. So we need to make sure this is in there nice and firm and stiff. So I'm just going to jam that in there. Doo-doo. Okay, so that's that glued on. So I need to leave this for an hour, maybe an hour, just to dry fully, so that when it's dry I can clamp onto that and I can give him a good coat of primer. Now what I'm going to do for the exterior of the vehicle, I'm going to prime in black, because I want to try and get some pre-shading. It does make painting white a bit of a nightmare, but we'll get there. It darkens the white a little bit, but it just gives it a bit of a shaded look and takes that edge off the white, and you can build it up. For the interior, well, for the dudes, I'm going to prime in white, just because I'm painting oranges and yellows and I want them to be fairly bright. And for the cockpit as well, I'll probably prime in white, just because I don't need it to be shaded or anything like that. The interior of the cockpit's nice and clean and funky. I'll show you some set pictures when we do the paint scheme. And then we'll start on the paintings. So, back in a moment. Okay, handbrake turn time again. I said there would be a few handbrake turns. I was going to get the figures and the back wall primed, but then it started raining and then it was too late at night, so I went to bed. And when I got up this morning, all this glue had dried. So you can see now the white PVA glue in here is just kind of locked these two wires in place. These are still movable. It just means these are out of the way, so when the battery goes into this bottom pot here underneath, it's not getting obscured by the wires. So somebody did ask me for a bit more information on the lighting. I'm afraid I can't help you because I didn't make it and I don't know anything about electronics and lighting. It's got some wires and there's some blue licorice all sorts and batteries that do the zzz power with the button and the turning on and the glowing. So I don't know. I have no idea. I can only do what I've told you. I'll tell you what I've told you about how I built this thing. I would have shown you this building this thing, but it was just me just jamming pieces of plastic card in randomly and swearing, so not much to show there. But yes, so that's come out quite nicely. So what we need to do, the first thing we need to do before we start getting this two parts together, I'll show you quickly how it goes together. The plan is, if for some reason, even though they've only got like 3 tabs, it's very easy to get these in the wrong place and also get the wire sticking out. Hello. It's actually not as easy as you think to actually put it together. So here's the interior. So that's the top. You can see there with the 2 lights pointing forward, and all you do with the battery case is this. It's brilliant. It just fits in, and if you angle it a bit you can shove the wires down out of the way, so when you look through the window you're not going to see any wires. Unless you look really far down you might see a little bit of a wire, but you're not going to be looking like that down that direction. So that's how it's going to look. There'll be the windows at the bottom aren't clear, so you won't see the wires. They're just going to be black. These 2 are clear and you can only really see in this top half. So yeah, so I'm quite proud of that. This doesn't need to be fixed in place, because once you put it in there and just plonk this on the front, you can just shove it forward. I mean, I might put a little bit of, say, blue tack in there just to stop it moving forward, and that's it. And then if I need to change the batteries or anything like that, you just pop the front off take this out, and you can turn it on, you can turn it off. I have to make the anime noise. Now I don't know if these bulbs will be too bright, but we're going to colour them, and we'll just have to hope they're not too bright. If they are too bright, most people will put resistors in there to reduce the voltage. I can't do that. So what I'll do is try and think of some other way, but I don't know yet. I don't know what they're going to be like, so we'll find out. So the first thing we need to do, before we go gluing things together, we need to do the first part of basic light blocking. There's two elements to the light blocking. We need to block the gap once it's glued together from any light escaping through the seam line, and we'll be filling this anyway. But we also need to block from light shining through the plastic. So if you turn the lights on, you might be able to see it does shine through the plastic where the bulbs are, right under there. So we need to try and block this as best we can. And for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the UMP primer, so the Ultimate Modelling Products Black Primer. And because it's the interior, you're not going to see it, I'm just going to brush it on. I'm not going to worry about spraying it. This one I might take out and spray when I do the figures, just for the sake of ease, but I'm tempted to brush it just because I'll get a thicker coat. Because the point of the primer in here is not for a base for paints, but to block light coming through. So that's the important bit. There will be a little bit of paint going on the interior bit just in the cockpit, just to make it the same colour. But so yeah, we're not too fussed. So what we're going to do first is put some primer on here, and this is quite simple. I've got some primer in the cup, and you can brush this primer. It's really nice. I may have chosen just the wrong brush. This brush is a bit stiff, and we're quite simply just going to brush it on all over. Okay, as you can tell by the epic blackness, priming has been done. I was priming the interior and suddenly thought to myself, I'm going to need to prime all the parts now because I need to figure out the light blocking. And I did the interior priming and it was still showing through the plastic, so I needed to see what happens when there's primer and paint on the outside as well. So the interiors were brush painted with the UMP black primer. And then what I did was I went over them on the outside and on the inside as well with some Army Painter Black Primer, which I've not tried before, and it's actually really nice. The Army Painter Black Primer, I just masked off the circuitry there and the battery pack just to give it a little extra cover. There was about 3 brush painted levels of UMP primer and then 1 blast of the Rattle Can Army Painter, and it's come out quite nice. I did the back wall and the 2 dudes in Tamiya Rattle Can primer, just because these are going to be brightly coloured, so I want them to be white. Now I know painting black, when I'm going to paint the outside white, is going to give me some challenges, but I have a cunning plan, and we'll get to that, hopefully if it works, when we get to that. But for the moment, we are done. What I want to show you is the light blocking effect. Now basically, effectively, the primer in here, the extra thick layer of primer, it doesn't matter if it's rough and ready because you're not going to see it, and when you see here this will be painted the cockpit colour, so it doesn't matter. The black primer hopefully will block out any light leakage. Now I know obviously I've got to glue all these together, so there will be a case of get all the seams filled, there'll be lots of tidy up to do. I have to scrape all the paint off the joints and things, so we've got all that to do yet. So we'll put the thing in there. And what I will do, put it the right way up, dear. What I will do is I will tell you what I will do. I'll turn it on. There's the lights. I'll put the back on. Put your back on. Oops. If I can get this on without breaking the whole thing. Upside down, you spoon. I'll get the back on. It's only loosely fit together. Okay, now what I'll do is I'll turn off the lights. This is where the camera goes horrible now. And let me turn off the other lights, hang on. And now this one. And what you can see is, it's quite a subtle glow, and that's exactly what I'm after. Now, there is one more thing I need to do to the lights, and there is something I did to the lights when they were in there. At first I thought they'd be super bright, but they're not going to be super bright, and I'll tell you for why. Let me turn this off. I'm keen not to drain the batteries. Let me turn the lights back on again. And the other lights. And the big light. Right, so I thought the lights were super bright at first, but what I did was, with a bit of a nod to my perfect grade Zaku, I painted over the sides of the bulbs. If you'll see here, I don't know if it'll come out with the blackness, but I painted over the sides of the bulbs in the primer, and underneath, you won't see, but most of the underneath is painted. So the only bit that's where the light's shining through is the very end of the bulb and the top here. I found that a big bright patch was here, where the bulbs are. So by blacking them under there with the primer, it helps block that. And the side here, I don't need light coming out, I just need light to shine forward. So by blocking out the sides of the bulbs, I don't have to worry about too much light leakage here. But there's one more thing we need to do, and that is to change the colour, because that's obviously a standard white light, so it's got kind of bluish white tint. I need to make that an orangey yellow. Traditionally people, when they make these, they make them either orange or yellow, and I quite like the orange. So what we're going to do, we're going to take some Tamiya Clear Orange X26. It's a gloss colour, but it doesn't actually matter. All that matters is it's a clear colour and it's orange. And this doesn't have to be neat at all. And all I'm going to do is get some on the brush. Oh, I need to get some more of this, I'm running low. Get some on the brush and just carelessly slap it on.
Slap it on!
Now I don't need to put a lot on, because I just need to tint the light that comes off into the orange. If I put a lot on, it'll be very orange. If I put a little bit on, it'll have a tint of orange. And there we have the new orange tinty light. Now I know it's not really coming out on camera very well because it's dark. And yeah, it's not good filming in the dark on a smartphone. But you can see now it has a yellowy orangey tint into the windows, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. Now there is light leakage down here, where you can see my shadow of my thumb. That's just because we haven't sealed that yet. But what I have noticed is there's no light leakage anywhere now. There's no light coming out of the back or the front or anywhere. These are little holes that get filled in. So those primer layers have done a perfect job of insulating the light from inside. I'll just turn that off. I'm very conscious of draining the battery because I don't want to have to replace them. It seems very complicated. So let me turn the lights on. And back again. So many lights. So yes, so the primer has insulated it perfectly against light leakage. Brilliant. So I know now that when I've added all the paint on top, it'll be absolutely fine. Okay, so we have our clear parts. Now what I'm about to do is only really relevant if you're going to be using the clear parts that come in the kit. There are third-party kits available for window frames and windows, but I'm just building this straight out of the box with whatever comes in the box, so that's what I'm limiting myself to. So what I'm going to be doing is showing you how I've made these fit. Now what happens is these clear parts go into the two triangular windows here, like this, you see. And when you take them off the sprue and clean them up and put them in, what you'll find is they don't quite fit. What you have is you have the clear part of the window here, and then this frame that goes around the edge. Now this will be painted white, and this is what you'll see along the edge here. Now in the third party kits, what you tend to get is a piece of plastic that goes along here, or resin, to make the window frame, but it's not strictly accurate. If you look at the filming model, it has a frame piece down here and a frame piece along the bottom, and that's all it has. The other white piece is this top bit here, which you've already got. So the ones that come in third-party kits, they're not quite accurate. So we're going to work with this anyway. When you first put it in, you'll find you've probably got a gap up here at the top, and this frame at the bottom doesn't line up with the hull of the command module. So you're going to need to do a little bit of kajiggerage. Kajiggerage, I like that word, kajiggerage. And it's fairly straightforward. All you need to do is, first of all, take off all the nub marks with your craft knife. You usually get one here and on the side. You need to open up these holes a little bit with your craft knife by just putting the blade in there and turning them. Do it from underneath. Do that for both. Make them quite wide. The window basically attaches to these two pegs here. And there's a little peg here and here that just push it forward and lock it in place. Doesn't matter if it's a bit loose and the hole's too big, because they're really just pegs, location pegs, not actual fixing it in place pegs. So widen those two holes. You'll need to sand this part here, this flat layer. You're not going to see this is inside. This is the glue contact surface, and what you'll have is you'll have a little bit of sort of flash on these two ejector pin marks that sticks up. So you want to sand that down till they're flat, and then a little bit more just to make this particular edge thinner than it starts off, just so it sits down snug and reduces the gap at the top. And last of all, you may need to sand just say the corners here a little bit, especially this corner, just to make them fit in snug with the two tabs that keep the glass pushed forward, just so it fits properly. And what you should have at the end of it is then a piece where the frame at the top and the bottom actually look horizontal to the armour's not the word, the plating on the hull. Okay, so we're going to mask this off. So I'm going to get some Tamiya tape. This is the 10mm tape, I think. It might not be. It might be in the wrong case. And we're just going to put this down on the desk. Now, the first thing you want to do is get your clear piece. Always wear gloves, by the way, when you're handling clear pieces. I ran out of my black and white gloves, so I've got these horrible clear ones that I got from the corner shop. Always give your piece a quick clean with a piece of either microfiber cloth, soft microfiber cloth, or this is a glasses cleaning cloth, just to get off any dust from sanding and fingerprints you may have put on it. And always handle these with gloves, again, just to minimise any fingerprints and hand schmutz. And what we need to do is very carefully mask this off. So what I'm going to do is take some of this tape, cut off a piece, and we're going to do this on the outside first. And all I'm going to do is, I'm not moving the piece around on the desk much because I don't want it to get scratched. We're going to put the first piece of tape on across the whole window if it decides not to move. No, that's not across. It's quite hard to do this on camera when you're trying to keep things in place. Get the first piece across, and we're actually going to cover up the window frame as well. There we go. Going to cover up the window frame as well. There. Hope this is all in focus for you. We're going to overlap this piece, so again it covers up that top corner of the window. And then what we need to do is get like a cocktail stick or a bit of wood. Have I got a skewer? There we go, there's a skewer. Get myself a skewer, and what I want to do is run the skewer along the edge of the window frame just to push the tape in. What we need to do now is first of all trim this off. So I'm using some Tamiya decal scissors for this, but any really fine scissors will do. And we need to trim off the excess here, and this is easier to do with, because of the shape of this piece, it's easier to do it with scissors. Don't actually need to do that edge, it just makes life easier because it's not going to stick to your hands. And for this top edge, this is where it gets a bit fiddly. We need to trim it a bit. Where's the edge? Now we're not going to leave the tape all the way over the top of the window, because all that will happen is it'll get glued in place when we glue the window in place. So we need to trim it back a little bit. Now you're not going to see the very top edge of the window, it's going to be in place and hidden, so it'll be fine. So that's in there. So now what we need to do is trim this away. Now we want to get rid of the frame because we're going to paint the frame white. So we want to get rid of the frame but keep the window. So very carefully get your blade at 45 degrees along the window frame. Now it's very hard for me to do this and see it and film it. So I'm running the blade very, very gently along the window frame. I'm not pushing down hardly at all because I don't want to put a big gouge into the plastic. And then we'll do exactly the same for this side. Again, 45 degrees, push it into the corner and run it along. If I push down really hard, not only would I gouge the plastic underneath, I'll also probably pull up this piece of tape. So where I've got the two pieces of tape crossing over. So I'll just do that once again. I hope this is on camera. Make sure you try and get that corner. Now what we should find, if we're lucky, if I pull that up now, as long as we've got the corner, not quite got the corner, okay, that's fine. We need to see if we get this corner. So you can see now if I pull that back and drop it, it's actually really hard to do this on camera. Can't tell you how hard it is. Pull that back carefully, and you can see we now have a piece of tape stuck to my finger. Brilliant, get off. We now have the tape is on the window part of the window, but the frame part is exposed. I'm just going to push that down, and I'm also going to run this stick across the clear part again, just to really emboss that into the corner, just so it's nice and flat. Okay, so we're going to glue this part in now. And what we're going to use for this, what I'm going to use for this, is Revell Contactor Clear. You're going to use a canopy glue, a clear canopy glue. Now you can use PVA glue for this step, but you'd have to thin it down, and when you thin it down you might make it too thin and it'll run all over the clear part of the windscreen. So I prefer to use a pre-made clear canopy glue for this, just because it's thick enough that it's going to get in where it needs to go but not run onto all the clear parts of the windows. And this couldn't be easier. The glue itself comes with a brush on the lid, so we shall get some glue on here first of all. So I'm going to take most of the glue off the brush, and what we'll do is we will put some glue on the two little attachment pegs here like this. Oops, make sure it's on screen, dear. You don't have to be too neat at this point. And we're going to put a little bit of glue along here. And all we need to do now, and apologies if this is out of focus, is simply place the window in place. Be as careful as possible not to get the actual window part of the window anywhere near the glue. Make sure the window goes behind the two tabs at the bottom. And push it down. Push, 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 push. Push, 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 push. Push, 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 push. Right. Okay, so that's in. It's behind those two tabs, that's perfect. So that's in place, but it's very loose. So what we need to do now is get some more contactor and run it along this edge. And what you'll see, hopefully, if it comes out, is that that glue should suck underneath the plastic, underneath the window, by capillary action. So I'll get some more. I'll put it on the two little tabs here just to lock these in. And the reason you want to use clear canopy glue and not something like cyanoacrylate glue or super glue and not polystyrene cement is that if you use polystyrene cement or CA glue, you'll mess up the plastic. The clear plastic will fog up and go horrible. I'm going to run some along this edge here, just so it sucks underneath and puts a little bit of grip on that corner. I'm going to touch it, as I knock the camera, I'm going to touch it to this corner to try and lock it in place. But I'm going to be very careful not to try and run the glue where that masking tape is, if I can avoid it. Because like I said, I don't want to glue the masking tape in place. That'll just make it a nightmare to get out. And I'll put a touch of it here in this corner, again just to lock it to the tab. Okay, so the windows are in and the glue is drying. We'll leave it about an hour or so for the glue to dry. Came out pretty good, as you can see, looking quite nice. Masked on the outside, not on the inside. This window frame on this one still isn't quite parallel to the hull plating, but it's only a little tiny bit of wonk, and I can kind of live with it, to be honest. I kind of took the sanding on these clear parts as far as I dared. My worry was if I did any more, they'd actually be too small and then they wouldn't fit properly, and then they'd just fall out all the time because I'd have no way to properly glue them in. So I took it as far as I dared, allowing for the fact I don't want them to fall out. So it's not quite straight, but you're never going to notice it. You know, you'll see this on the shelf and you'll be like, wow, look at that Eagle transporter, it's brilliant, especially with that lighted cockpit, which has been done very, very well. You won't notice any little misalignments on there. But like I said, there are third-party kits out there that allow you to do the window frames and things, so they are to your satisfaction. But I'm fine with that, it's not a problem at all. The next step, once you've done that, is to go over those joins again with some PVA glue. I've just gone over the top and around the back and jammed it underneath and over the peg holes and down the sides and where these little retaining pins are, just to give it extra grip. And again, as I said before, do get some PVA glue in your arsenal. Long story short, the only two glues you can use on clear parts are PVA glue and canopy glue, which is basically like PVA glue. Never use any other kind of glue on your clear parts, ever. If you don't believe me, go and get a cheap little airplane kit, glue the canopy on with normal glue or CA glue, and watch what happens. Sad factory will happen. That's what will happen. Sadness and regret. Don't do it on an expensive kit. Now the next step would be something I can't do now because as I finished doing this and once this has dried, nature decided that it was going to open up the heavens and it's going to just rain endlessly. It's like Ferenginar outside. It's the end times. It's torrential rain. You know, it's June, but hey, what can you do? Is it June or is it July? Is it May? I don't even know what month it is. Anyway, what we'll do next, or what I'll do next off camera, is go over this interior part with primer again. Now I haven't masked off this part of the window, and you're thinking, why are you going over it with primer? Because I want these bottom windows to be black. If you look at the filming model, and often models that people make of this kit, of this ship, These are just black, because all you're going to see is the feet anyway, so there's no point busting a gut trying to get a nice view through the window, because you're not going to see it anyway, and it's going to be sat down. So I'm just going to paint those black so they're solid black. Do it on the inside and spray can it or airbrush it so you get a nice solid black window. You don't get any brush marks. I'll do a couple of coats as well to stop light leakage. So that will go on there. On the other side, the top side, we're not going to go anywhere near it with a rattle can or an airbrush, because these aren't masked off, and if I mask these off, my risk is that when I take the masking tape off the inside, I'll pull the windows out. So what I'll do with a brush and some UMP primer is just go over these joins here, this top bit and down the side, and these two pins. The secondary purpose here, or the main purpose for doing it on the top bit, is where I've scraped paint off. Then you have no paint and it's just bare plastic, and when you turn the light on, you'll have light leak. So on the other side, it's really just to make the windows black. On this side, it's to stop light leak from those scrapey bits. But again, it stops light shining through these clear parts, so it does that on this side as well. So that's going to do it for this episode. I think we've kind of covered enough now. I don't know how long this is. I've not edited it yet, but I think we'll leave it there for now. When we come back in the next one, obviously we've still got to glue these two halves together, and I need to get the back of the cockpit and the pilot dudes all painted up. You can see here how they attach in. It's quite neat. It's just like, ding, pilot. There you go. So interior is a wall and a dude. You might see a little bit of that peg from the window, but I don't know. We'll find out. But it just remains for me to say thank you so much for watching. As always, link here. Do pop along to emodels.co.uk. To me, they are the UK's finest online retailer of model making goodness. They ship all over the world, so you don't have to be in the UK. But they are brilliant. Go and take a look. Go and have a look if you're interested in this kit or any kit at all. They have a massive stock of kits, of tools, of equipment, all that kind of stuff. Anything you need, basically. And I always joke and say, if they don't have it, you don't need it. If you ever do go on the website and there's something there you particularly want something of, a particular kit or particular tool or particular product, and it's not on the site, either means it's out of stock, which will be back in stock again soon, or it's something they don't carry. However, regardless of which one of those it is, if there's something you want and it's not there, drop them an email. It'll either be something they're going to get back in stock soon and they'll let you know when it's back in stock, or it'll be something they don't stock but they can probably get from one of their distributors. So I went in the other day with Ted, Skipper Ted, my friend Tedward, who does the other videos, building his big 35-foot long U-boat. Yes, I'm building a World War II YouTube. Building his big U-boat. We went down for a visit and take some of our builds down to them. They had this enormous Citroen kit of a 1/8 scale, a 1940 something Citroen something or other. I can't remember which one it was. Big old vintage Citroen. The box was huge. I was like, wow, that's awesome. Turns out they don't actually stock that kit at all. It was a hella kit. They don't stock it at all. But a customer had said, is there any chance you can get hold of this kit for me, because it's for my dad? And they were like, yeah, sure, no problem. And it was being packed up to be sent out to him. So if there's something there you can't find, drop them a line. They'll either be getting it back in stock soon, or they'll probably be able to get it for you. And in reality, if it's, say, a paint or a piece of equipment or a tool or something, they've probably got lots and lots of alternatives that are just as good. So do go along. Don't panic if you can't find anything. Drop them a line. But go along, spend your money. Pete Mate. And Pete Mate will love you if you give him lots of money. And just remains for me to say again, thank you for watching. Thank you to eModels for supplying this model kit and all the tools I've been using. Take care of yourselves. I'll stop waffling now because I need to go and get a coffee. Take care of yourselves. Go build something cool. Go be cool. And until next time, adios amoebas. My gloves are making a little, I don't know if you can hear it, my gloves are making little squidgy noises. It's not very nice. Listen. That's the noise these gloves. I got some cheap gloves and they're not, I mean, look at you. It's horrible. It's like some kind of horror thing. Bye!